This is Story Saloon, short stories centre stage. I'm Jane Messer. In this episode, we're going to hear the short story The Crane Flies by Michelle Hamadache, read by Charlotte Salusinszky. Michelle Hamadache is a writer of short stories, essays and reviews, with publications in Australian, British and US journals. She's had short stories longlisted for the Elizabeth Jolley Short Story Prize and shortlisted for the Sidney Neilma Overland Short Story Prize. Michelle is also a lecturer in creative writing at Macquarie University and has been a fiction editor with the journals Southerly and Mascara Literary Review. Reading the story is the talented Charlotte Salusinszky, actor, writer and theatre maker. She's worked with Griffin Theatre's emerging playwright program, with PACT and Q Theatre. Her recent acting work includes Mercury Poisoning at KXT Theatre, where I first saw her perform, and Shakespeare in Love at New Theatre. Her passion for stories about survival made her a perfect choice for this short story. The Crane Flies takes us to Italy, ostensibly in 1991, but with the myths of Dante's Inferno licking at the story's edges. This is a rich literary tale that's completely contemporary, with its themes of illegal immigration and wage theft, but it's also wonderfully Gothic in style. I'm going to provide just a tiny bit of setting for you. The story's title, The Crane Flies, refers to a thin, leggy, winged insect called a crane fly. One of the characters is from Australia, and the other, the young man Sofiane, is from Algeria and is living in Italy without a visa. The two characters meet a woman who they call Donna Canona. The writer is referencing a song by the Italian songwriter Francesco de Gregori. It's a song about love that defies social expectations. Here is Charlotte Salusinszky reading The Crane Flies.
The Crane Flies by Michelle Hamadache. It was the summer of 91. Hotel Beatrice, a deep dive in the bosom of the Apennines. Midnight long gone, but the heat still dripping down walls, trapped under the eaves. Ahead of us, La Donna Canon walked greasy hallways so narrow her sides scraped the walls. We trailed behind her like Dante's dogs, exhausted and filled with loathing. She stopped, we stopped. Room 33. I looked at Sofiane. He looked at me. A baby cried out in the dark. Someone swore. The baby stopped. La Donna Canon lit a cigarette and inhaled twice, exhaled once. Eternity crawled past. She leaned in close. I smoked her smoke. When she spoke, her cigarette moved like chalk between her lips. Eccoci qua. A room for the lovers, she said. Il clandestino di merde e la sua puttana. For the filth and his whore, she said. She threw open the door and a ripple of cool air shimmied out. I fed you. Now, like Lot, I provide a room for Othello and his Desdemona. With those words, La Donna Canon curtsied like a loaded gun, then limped back down the hallway, the grease trap, with the slow, moving thighs of an apocalypse. I wished her a slow and painful death. Sofiane reached his hand around the architrave and fumbled about the wall for the light switch. The room flickered like a bad horror movie. Then the naked bulb lit up the unmade bed so brightly we flinched. Hotel white, the linen glittered with the gargantuan corpses of insects, long-legged and feathery-winged. Sofiane swore. I swore. A year together and our profanities had bred, copulated, producing many and varied mongrel babies. Sofiane was a statue at the door, so I walked into the room and over to the bed. leaning in close to examine the creatures. They died like contraptions, bent, folded over, legs broken off. I lifted one by the wing. A human face. I dropped it with a shriek. Sufyan flinched, then said that all mothers of the world should be fucked for bringing us to this place. I agreed. He wanted to cry, I wanted to cry. No tears came. I stared at the bed littered with the dead, ugly creatures, but tragically gentle. Then I tore off the sheets and hurled them across the room. Mava van culo, tu e padre di merde, I spat. You sack of guts, your father's bastard, abortive rooting hogs. Then I picked up the bedspread and shook it out the window, praying the dark air with its fragrance of fir trees and summer earth would wash it clean before laying it across the mattress, a cliché of abject stains. Amore mio, voilà, I said, patting the cover invitingly. Sufyan looked at me like I'd grown 2 heads. For a moment I thought he was going to leave me, turn around and walk right back out of the hotel and into the night, maybe back to Hussein Day and his mum, maybe across the border to Hamburg, never to be seen again. And I would be left to find my way home alone. But he didn't. Instead, he muttered, Bismillah, and stepped into the room as though the lino were mud and his sneakers white. In the bathroom at the end of the hall, I splashed water on my face, rinsed under my arms and between my legs, brushed my teeth, thought of home, of Sufyan, of home again. I managed to cry, my eyes like hard-boiled lollies in the mirror. I wished I were a child again, a pupa, the chrysalis intact and all the unknown world a dream. The tap dripped, a baby cried, no one stopped it. Sufyan was asleep when I returned, curled up, hair dishevelled, mouth slightly ajar, just like a little boy. He'd righted the bedside lamp and turned it on for me so that the room now glowed orange. He'd also moved a red-bound Bible from his side table to mine, as though it might bite or convert him in his sleep. He'd folded his t-shirt and jeans neatly on a chair, leaving on only his singlet, which he wore always, even on the hottest of days, and his faded Y-fronts that had come all the way from Algeria with him and were on their last legs. I snuggled in beside him, nuzzling his neck with my nose, wanting him to be awake and with me, or preferably inside me. His breathing grew raspy, a little snore-chortled, and I nudged him, but Sufyan quieted, set adrift in fathomless sleep. It's too cruel to wake someone from that. Lonely and lust-filled, sleepless and slippery with sweat, I waited for dawn, watching the long-legged insects of the night lope in through the window, like slow angels or the frayed ends of time. Getting to Hotel Beatrice was a shit show. Without Fulvio, the chrysanthemum man, would never have made it. We were halfway up the middle of nowhere when he drove by in his battered old Fiat, the first vehicle to pass since we'd started walking, and we'd been walking for hours. Sufyan put his thumb out, me wondering whether it was worse to die hitchhiking or of exposure. Fulvio grasped the wheel with hands blackened and cracked and the whole of his middle finger gone. He didn't say a word to us the whole trip. When he pulled up halfway down the middle of nowhere, neither of us were sure whether he was dropping us off or preparing to gut us. I couldn't see it from the road, but the path would take us to her hotel. Fulvio apologised for not taking us to the door, but his wife was waiting back in Volterra with dinner. He was keen to get back there before nightfall. Sufyan, what do we do if there's no hotel? Sufyan shrugged and started up the path. We hadn't been sure we'd alighted at the right station, We hadn't been sure we'd walked in the right direction. And we definitely hadn't been sure about Fulvio, so how were we to know there was a hotel over the hill, let alone a hotel owned by Donna? "Sofyan," I called out again, while Sofyan walked on like a better version of Orpheus. "Sofyan, show me the paper." Sofyan stopped, reached into the front pocket of his jeans, and handed me the slip of graph paper he had guarded so carefully since Friday. Some mountain bird screeched, and the sky dimmed. The graph paper sat like a giant snowflake in my palm, its spidery letters only just visible in the gloam. Donna Canon, 03578-990. So who is this Donna? I held the scrap of paper aloft and yelled because Sofyan was moving so quickly up the hill and away. "Sofyan! Wait!" Furious, I scrunched up the paper and threw it away. Sofyan kept walking. I jogged to catch up, but he picked up pace. I couldn't keep up. We were almost running, but I managed to puff out, "Did you even speak to this Donna on the phone? Does Donna know we're coming?" Sofyan wheeled around, his face like stone. "Stop calling her that. It's not her real name. It's just what everyone calls her." "What do you mean it's not her real name? We've travelled all the way here to work for a woman without a name?" Sofyan glared, muttered something about fucking Australians, and stalked off. "What is she? The Cannon Lady? You're telling me we spent our last 40 mil lire on 2 tickets to a hole in the middle of a forest to work for a circus lady? Ma vaffanculo, porco figlia di puttana maiale. You fuck-knuckle. Tu sei matto veramente malbul." We'd crested the hill without even noticing. There before us stood the hotel. Like the witch's house, it had brown shutters with hearts carved out, so that the white of the facade showed up like icing. There was a gravel drive with a grassy area to one side, and sitting on a picnic table, her feet on the bench, cigarette in hand, silhouetted against the mountain of trees and the sinking sun like a black queen of hearts, was La Donna Canon. To understand that day, you'd have to know that the very same morning we left Perugia before breakfast, travelled for hours on 3 different trains, each time only just making it to the right platform before the next train departed, skipped lunch, smoked a packet of cigarettes between us, downed 3 short blacks each, ran out of cigarettes, counted lire, looked at panini, craved Canetti, bought a soft packet of Marlboro instead of Camel and instead of Canetti. I don't remember if we drank water. It's likely we didn't. We never bought water in bottles back then. Drink bottles were things that soldiers and explorers carried, not ordinary folk. By the time La Donna Canon led us through the lobby to the kitchen, we were famished and tired and dying of thirst. Like we were the miller's daughters and she the king, she showed us a giant laundry tub with a hose attached, and a mountain of cutlery, pans and baking dishes piled high as a mountain of straw. "Eccoci qua," she said. "Wash." So we washed. Sofyan washed and I dried. We argued. I washed and Sofyan dried. "You're too slow," yelled El Capo Cuocho, the chef. Sofyan washed and I dried. Enormous fry pan after fry pan made my arm bend with its weight. Tears of humiliation squeezed down my cheeks and stained themselves with sweat and grime and the misplaced wrath of hunger. "Sofyan, ho fame." "You're hungry?" he asked. "Wash," he said. We washed. "Sofyan, sono stanca." "You're tired?" he asked. "Wash," he said. We washed. "Sofyan, I'm dying of hunger." "Muoia di fame, Australiana." "Die of hunger," he said. But wash. Ti prego, wash. We washed. Midnight, the kitchen empty, the fires dying down like martyr pyres, the sink hosed clean of suds and dinner debris, the pile of soaked tea towels hurled into the laundry basket in the corner. La Donna Canon easing her way silently, stealthily back into the kitchen, pouncing on us, her voice gunstone in our ears. We jump. She tells us to sit at the enormous bench on long stools that left our feet dangling thirstily far from the floor. She pauses before us, like a ponderous Ivan the Terrible, to drown, to roast, to boil in oil. Like an ignited fuse came the news. Neither of us had done well enough to get a job at her hotel. She paused to look at Sufjan as though he were a creature of undetermined value. Perhaps you, il clandestino, with time? Her? No. Burn your mother's cunt, Sufjan whispered in Algerian. La Donna Canon heard but didn't understand. Sufjan asked sweetly, "What will you pay us for our labours?" She replied that considering we would have to sleep here for the night, we would be even, with her marginally behind. But what could you do when you advertised for staff and ended up with mortini di merde and babies better off drowned at birth? Louder this time, but still in Algerian, Sufjan told her to burn in hell, she and her entire family living and dead. Then he added in Italian that he doubted a room in this hotel was worth the labour of 2 kitchen hands, and that given the late hour, we had spent more time doing dishes than we would asleep, especially because we would clear out of this hellhole at first light, so surely it wouldn't be too much to ask for a plate of food. With that, La Donna Canon shrugged, smiled in a way that didn't show her teeth, slid down from her stool, paused, breathed heavily, walked across the room with the slow, aching steps of someone whose every joint shrieked in pain. She stopped. Sufjan lit the cigarette stolen from Il Capo Cuoco earlier, then passed it to me. He lifted 2 more from La Donna Canon's packet of MS left on the bench. As though drawing strength from our hunger, La Donna Canon puffed herself up like the ringmaster she was, then sank back low to the ground. She would feed us. To the wood-fired oven she limped with the steps of someone beaten from birth. She lowered the drawbridge to survey the cavern. Nothing. She swiveled her head, grinning the grin of someone remembering the day she wrested the whip from her oppressor and flailed his body until liver and brain broke free. She limped to the bench and lifted the fly cloth from a plate of honey cakes. She took one and ate it, savouring each mastication as though we weren't there, licking her lips, her fingers. Sufjan and I watched her like rats. She replaced the fly cloth and laboured her way to an old electric oven. It was stone cold, but from its hollow she pulled out a plate heavy with some monstrous cadaver. This, she seemed to be saying, this will be just right. 2 jaunty little flies careered off as she waved her hand above what appeared to be a volcanic mound. There are few things that frighten me as much as the sight of something stuffed. Until that moment, in the fiery furnace of La Donna Canon's kitchen, it had never occurred to me that vegetables were something you could stuff. My mother had cooked meat and 3 vegetables and called anything else good food spoiled. It was a truth I'd never questioned. That night, in the bowels of hell, La Donna Canon took that rule and shoved it as far up the bum as she could. The plate she pulled from that wretched oven held 2 offerings, one shiny, black, the other fire engine red. both so engorged with a fever of breadcrumbs, mincemeat and cheese to the point of splitting their skin, I couldn't recognise them as eggplant and capsicum. I was young then, remember, I was gauche. To my unknowing eyes, verdure ripenne al forno were nothing less than a bacchanal of gutted creatures from the forest, innards pouring from the slit. La Danocanon laid the plate before us, pinched the top off the eggplant, mopped up the oil and crumbs that spilt lava-like onto the plate, and opened her mouth wide enough to engulf eggplant and fingers up to the knuckles. The fingers emerged triumphant, glistening with oil and saliva, before descending one last time into the cavernous mouth for a licking clean. "Eccoci qua," she said. "Eat." I lowered my head to my folded arms and sobbed. It wasn't the Bible beside the bed. It was an old red-bound edition of Boccaccio's Decameron, all boils bursting and bodies burning. Sofiane was dreaming, lids doing that freaky flicker of REM sleep. My tossing and turning didn't rouse him, no matter how hard I thrashed. I sat up on the edge of the bed, descending my feet from the floor like a child who believes the floor thick with the bodies of spiders or snakes. One toe at a time, I lowered my feet to the linoleum, warm and just a little bit sticky. With no watch and no clock, time stood still in an eternal night. Suddenly fearful, I looked to Sofiane to make sure he was still young, and we hadn't turned 100 while waiting for dawn. With a body so angular, its flight seemed mechanical, a last lonely insect flew in to take my place on the bed, while I went like a moth to the window. The night sky was fragrant with sap and fir needles bristling. Ledge biting into my hands, I leant out as far as I could into the moving darkness, halfway between jumping and flying. It was then that I saw her, La Danocanon. She was sprawled across the picnic bench, half in shadow and half in light cast from the hotel porch, like a woman severed in two. She was smoking, staring at the night sky with the eyes of one who could levitate, if only they could be bothered. She raised a cigarette to her lips and inhaled. The night stilled. She exhaled, the smoke lingering about her, a diaphanous shroud. The stillness grew. I felt it like a chain pulled taut between us. I leant out further still, the ledge now biting into my thighs. So immutable, so carved in stone she seemed. It was possible she had fallen there from the sky and landed winded, the world pressing in on her. Then, as if upon a spit, La Danocanon rolled over to lie fetus-like, one arm wrapped around herself in a solitary embrace, the other holding aloft her cigarette. Then slowly as the hour hand, she brought the cigarette to her lips, drawing down on the thing as though it were a straw in the glass of life. I was nothing but a pair of eyes, a pair of seeing slits cut into the fabric of the night. The bend of her elbow was the bend of my elbow, her exhalation mine, her eyes my eyes, our heartbeats one. Hers was the sorrow of someone after the vultures have feasted, but before the eyes have closed. I pulled back from the window and returned to the bed like a succubus, pressing myself to Sofiane. I forced him not just to wake, but to wake hard and hungry for me. If that was what it was like to be older, not young anymore, I didn't want it. Not one bit. We fucked, forgetting the bodies of lovers and not lovers who had copulated like cliches on the corpses of crane flies. We fucked until Sofiane came, whispering into my ear like breath onto a smouldering fire. "Traveller, did you come?" We awoke at dawn and descended the shimmering mountain in near darkness, arriving at the train station as the sky turned red. Back in the forest of firs, La Donna Canon, in her filthy chambers, awoke, found us gone, shrugged, opened a leather-bound address book she kept in her pocket and dialed her contact, the African smuggler. Sufyan and I argued when we returned to Perugia. I told Sufyan he'd be better off without me. He didn't reply. I waited. He stayed silent. I walked out. It took him until evening to find me on the steps of San Lorenzo's cathedral. I thought it was over, sat like a lost glove on the stairs. He must have seen the way I was huddled, as though the stage were too empty, too brightly lit. He didn't smile, but in a good way, so it is only his eyes burning that I remember. Slowly he picked his way towards me through the tourists scattered about the steps like bunting, their voices a vaudeville in the heat, more raucous, more hateful than circus people. Me watching him slowly ascend as though he might vanish, his never-shifting gaze a river between us. The white August sun sinks. Pressed together like Siamese twins, Sufyan's fingers of velvet around my waist. A kiss, light then slow, my face against his. The skin of his neck melting with my lips. When a single bead of sweat rolled down my temple, Sufyan wiped it away the way he might have done a tear. "Marry me, traveller," he whispered. "Marry me."
The live readings for Story Saloon at the Vanguard were recorded by Martin Gallagher. Your host has been Jane Messer. A big thanks to the whole Story Saloon team.